Hey there, great to have Darren Roos today, CEO of IFS, which is a leading European ERP and field service and asset management software vendor. He's had very successful stints at SAP and Software AG before that, and he joins us today from beautiful sunny London. Darren, thank you for joining me. Tell us a little bit more about your career and yourself.
Thanks, Vinnie. It's great to be here. So it's been about 20 years in enterprise software. Strangely enough, prior to IFS, predominantly with German software companies, as you just said, a cumulative nearly 15 years with Software AG and SAP, and then joined IFS just under 3 years ago as chief exec. And it's been a great journey with IFS in taking the business to really to the global stage, diversifying the portfolio from ERP to, as you said earlier, include our service management offering. This year we'll hit the $800 million mark, and it's truly a global enterprise software business today, and super proud of that.
Well, thanks. Have you done okay in London? With all the COVID outbreaks and so on?
Yeah, look, I think it's tough everywhere, and I think we're fortunate to be in a part of the country where the outbreaks haven't been that bad, and family are all well and dealing with the challenges. But frankly, we're pretty privileged. So I think hearts go out to all of those people who have been directly impacted by it. But touch wood, so far all good with us.
Well, Darren, it's in all the doom and gloom, it's actually been an amazingly innovative time, right? We've seen auto companies jump in to make ventilators. We've obviously seen all kinds of healthcare heroics. We've seen people jump in to make PPE, last mile logistics, unbelievable scaling. In the US, we had the SBA approved 5 million PPP, short-term small business loans. Just the volumes, the pivoting, and the innovations have been phenomenal. I'm sure you've seen some in your customer base, and especially in Europe. Tell us about what some of the heroics you've seen.
So look, I think the resilience and flexibility that we've seen are traits that customers really need in order to navigate in this super dynamic environment. And I think that needs to translate into the systems that they're using, the software that they're using, so that they can really drive to remain relevant to their customers. So we see it in all of those. We talk about, at IFS, we talk about being for the challengers. And we've seen that challenger mindset in our customer base. Some examples are Munters, who manufacture and service air treatment solutions. They saw an acute need to have their service technicians conduct work remotely. And within 2 weeks, over 200 employees in 22 countries were using our remote assistance solution for remote repair. Cobra in the UK switched its operations within weeks to manufacture medical tubing. Indiflux in Denmark, who are a customer of ours, did similar. In the US, Raven Technology started producing PPE, and some of our construction customers were involved in building the Nightingale hospitals in the UK. Right. But I think across the board, we've seen loads of customers responding in incredible ways, which has been fantastic to see. So as you say, lots of beacons of light in relative darkness.
And it's funny. I've done 60 of the interviews. Every business executive I've talked to talks about these heroics, and it's positive. But in the media and in the politics, you don't seem to hear much about it. So thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank all your customers for doing what they're doing. Darren, one of the interesting things about this phenomenon is I've noticed what I call vertical edge applications have taken off. So telemedicine in healthcare. In the US, the whole PPP loans in fintech. The last mile logistics, the Shopify of the world, helping merchants take orders, e-commerce orders, and then help them with the third-party logistics and so on. Mortgages in fintechs. So it seems like there's a lot of small, almost bite-sized and very, very revenue-centric opportunities. In your case, I think it's been field service, right? So tell us about some unique things, the demand you've seen around field service, especially the remote support and so on?
So I think the broader field service market, I wouldn't describe as bite-sized. It's a 3 billion market today, growing to 5 billion in 2025. And really loads of business moving towards, servitization as a business model. So I think, field service as a domain, bigger. But what we are seeing is within service management, you talked about, that last mile logistics component. And I think there we certainly see leveraging technologies like our remote assistance or like scheduling and optimization, route management, where those components, which I absolutely would describe as bite-sized, having a significant impact in driving efficiency in customers. If you're having to get tests out or you're having to deliver food packages, and we have a customer in the US as an example that is responsible for delivering food packages across the New York state, making sure that you've got optimal route management has a huge impact on the ability to get those meals to the right places. So, absolutely right. I think that really interesting ways in which technology is being leveraged where before the need just wasn't there.
What does that mean for the other part of the business? Because it seems like longer ERP projects, for a couple of reasons. People don't have the money. And second, they're very dependent on human implementers, right? Systems integrators. And nobody really wants them to show up at their facilities. So they're still learning how to do remote implementations. How has that impacted your pipeline and business?
We did a webinar series recently called Mindful. And in the Mindful series, I did an interview with Akhilesh Tiwari from TCS, who are one of our partners. And Akhilesh and I talked specifically around this. And there were two main takeaways from that discussion, which I think are relevant to the question you're asking here. One is that customers' appetite to drive much quicker time to value by adopting technology fit to standard has increased significantly. So whereas before you'd have spent 80% of the time on the fettling around the perimeter on customizations and configurations and non-standard items, that's gone away. Customers are driving much more fit to standard. And that means that they're getting, the 80% of the value in 20% of the time, which is fantastic to see. And as a software vendor, that's our utopian situation. And then in terms of the going on site, what we're seeing is a much greater comfort level with, most of the work. And in fact, we've had examples of customers that have initiated, completed, and signed off projects 100% remotely in this period. So, TCS talked about their, 25 by 25, I think it is, which is that only 25% of their work will be done remotely, on site by 2025. I think that was the program. So, a massive move towards remote work. And again, that's fantastic because from a sustainable, planet sustainability perspective, we don't have as many people flying around in planes trying to get to customer sites. From a productivity perspective, it's better because, we're able to do the work and not waste time, spending time on planes, trains, and automobiles to get to customer site to initiate projects. So, much more focused, much more practical, and I think better for customers all around because they're seeing value faster and at a lower total cost of ownership.
How about automation? Are you seeing your integration partners? Because that's one thing they've resisted. They're still used to the, pyramids. A lot of people, armies. Express Warehouse. We used to call them school buses.
Yes.
Are you seeing automation in your integrator partner ecosystem?
I don't think that we're seeing a lot of automation, but we are seeing a lot more of leveraging the native technology. So I think that's a good thing for us, obviously. As I said before, as a software vendor, what we really want is we want customers to use the technology as it was intended. We want them to go live as fast as possible and start to realize benefits. And we do see that. I think there's a lot of scope for automation. What we are seeing, which I think is interesting, is customers' attitude and openness to looking at new forms of technology, whether that's digital twins, whether that is, I mentioned augmented reality with our IFS remote assistance before, that kind of emerging technology. But what's changed is that, I think that for a long time, we've been looking at pilots around blockchain and artificial intelligence and, lots of speculative work where frankly customers would throw money at projects which had no defined expected return, and that stopped. So customers are saying, look, you can show me how this is going to impact my business, where there's a demonstrable business case, and I'm keen to explore it. And that's great, because that's the mantra that we've always had. Always looked at how do we embed these next generation technologies in the application so that customers can use them out of the box without having to do big incremental projects to realize value.
Now you're into some very asset intensive industries, right? Scandinavia in particular. Tell us some of the projects they are doing in this, where travel is an issue. I mean, remote places are an issue. What are you seeing in that part of the world?
Look, I think it's more of the same. I don't know that we've seen a huge difference. I think that the customers have continued to do projects. From the beginning, it was clear to me that all of the customers that we were dealing with, that we do deal with, prospects that we deal with, fit into two categories. There's the ones that are, have a sense of, I guess, inertia, who are unsure of what the future is going to bring, and they're in this holding pattern, and I'm sure you see many of those. And then there are others that are saying, look, we've got to get on with it. This COVID's going to be around for a while. Our competitive landscape's not going to change. We need to take advantage of the opportunity. And I've spoken to many customers where, particularly where COVID has had a dramatic impact on their operations, some of them are seeing the opportunity while the factories aren't operating at full productivity, or while those assets aren't being used the way they ordinarily would be, to say, look, now's the perfect time for us to be doing a project like this. The things aren't going to get any better afterwards. If there are cost efficiencies to be driven, if there are new business model opportunities, now's the time to save them. To take advantage of them. So, we see that.
We've seen in the US, railroads are doing extremely well for different reasons, but partly because trucking has had a labor shortage. And then I live in Florida, and we've seen construction continue.
Yeah.
Certainly helped the employment here stay up, and thank God that the roads have been actually much nicer now that we're starting to see more traffic. So
yes.
Darren, let's talk a little bit about leadership. I mean, you've been around the world, you've been in different multinational companies. There is no script for this, right? There's no MBA program that taught us how to go from a crisis that went from health to financial to diversity to now climate change. It just seems like it keeps evolving.
Yes.
What has inspired you to lead in this phase, and what other leaders have you seen where you go, wow, that's impressive?
I think that the thing that has inspired me throughout were, and I'd rather not name names, I think, but where you've seen real authentic leadership, where and I'd made the decision to do this myself in my organization, is not, if I didn't know the answer, is to be honest about that, not to pretend that I knew what was going to happen or what was around the corner. So being really authentic. I think the second thing was that it became very clear immediately that over communication was going to be required. I have 4,000 people. They're spread all over the world. They come from, vastly different demographic groups. I have 1,500 people in Sri Lanka. And, the quality of life that they have and the circumstances in which they live are vastly different to my Scandinavian colleagues, as an example. And, the way that I tackled this, and I learned from loads of people who I think were doing a better job than I did, which was, let's communicate really often. I did frequent, weekly live streams where all of our staff could see me, and I could take live questions. And, we took really decisive action early. And the action that we took is, rather than making promises that I didn't know I would be able to keep, and we saw a lot of that. We saw a lot of leaders making promises that, frankly, I knew they couldn't necessarily keep, is that we said, look, these are the actions we're going to take. These are the consequences of those actions. The implications are that we won't have to riff anybody during this process, but everybody's going to take a little bit of pain so that nobody has to make the ultimate sacrifice of losing their job. And, that's what we did from me all the way down through the organization, lots of communication, lots of open honesty, and just kept that dialogue going. And frankly, we're still going now. We still have the cadence now. And I think that it's really helped us to weather the storm incredibly well. But I think authenticity and regular communication has been the secret to success here.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that. You have a very global point of view. Let's talk about the global economy.
Yes.
I've been asking everybody, do you see a V recovery, sharp? Do you see a gradual U recovery? Do you see a W, spikes up and down? Or is it going to be dead for a while, an L recovery? Tell me your perspective from Europe, rest of the world.
Yeah, I am amused by people's response that, we're seeing a V. And, the only people that are seeing a V are stock market investors. And that's not the economy. So, I think that at this point, what do we know? We know that economies have been significantly impacted. We know that GDP has been impacted. We know that unemployment is high. And we know that unemployment is not going to bounce back, right? There are industries, many industries, whether that's the hotel, restaurant, hospitality, whether that's commercial airlines, etc., that are impacted, and they will be impacted for a long time. So, in my opinion, there's no doubt. I don't think there's a letter to describe this, because it's clearly fallen down very sharply. It is going to be low for some time, and then we'll start to see an improvement again, likely a gradual improvement once we see a vaccine, or there is a realization, and I think this can be politicized also, but I think once we get to a point either that there is a vaccine or that there is political support for a world where we live with COVID. And we're saying, look, it's going to be here. There might not be a vaccine, but we can't afford to let it grind our economies to a halt. And therefore, we have to get on with things in some way, shape, or form. So, either the vaccine or that approach will then see a gradual recovery, because there isn't going to be an overnight bounce back. There's no way that, I am going to go back to traveling every second week like I used to. That's not going to happen. There's no way I'm going to go back to eating out as often as I ate out before. There are just fundamental behaviors that I think may never, ever be the same again. And those will have an impact. And the flip side is that there are other industries that are benefiting. So, my view is that it's a recovery that looks like no letter there is, but, something like a U, but with a much slower recovery.
Several people have said it's a Nike swoosh. So,
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't heard that, but if I'd heard that, that's exactly how I would describe it.
And of course, in the U.S., the politicians are calling it a K recovery, because some sectors are doing extremely well and the others are going this way. But, we'll keep the politicians out of this. Darren, any final advice you want to share with your peers, customers?
I think that we've weathered the storm remarkably well. And I mean that from a number of different perspectives. One, we haven't had to lay anybody off. Number two, we've had incredibly resilient revenues. We've continued to grow, and the business has continued to be successful. We've been able to continue to do what we've done prior to COVID, albeit at a slower pace of growth. And I attribute that to the fact that we have legitimately stayed focused on how do our customers benefit from what we're doing. How do we continue to stay focused on how do our customers see value from our activities? And I think that is a formula for success. If everybody focused more on the value creation of their customer rather than their own value creation, then you end up with much more sustainable models. I look around in the industry that I'm in, and I see a lot of software vendors who are just trying to get over the hump, and that's leading to business practices which that they may fulfill the investor expectations in the short term, but they are not sustainable models, right? whether that be compliance activities, whether that's forcing customers to do things that will not drive incremental value in the customer's business. And that is not a recipe for success. So, you know, my caution is to anybody who's doing something today that is fulfilling a short-term need that they have, but is not a sustainable practice. I urge them to rethink it, because everybody's hurting at the moment. And when this period is over, your customer is going to think about what you did when they were hurting, and when they can leave, they will leave.
Well, you know, I've heard from several executives, take care of your employees and take care of your customers, and the memories will be long. So, yeah. Yes. Darren, thank you so much. Appreciate your lot of great thoughts, and stay safe. Look forward to seeing you in person one of these days.
I hope so, Vinnie, and thank you. It was a real pleasure.